think
Mhm.
more people are aware of AI than ever before, but really it's just an enhancement to previous tools that were already in place. And the solutions that we offer are starting to think about, okay, how do we start to include some of this new functionality and technology into it to continue improving the experience, but also keeping some guardrails in place because this is a public facing thing and there's an associated risk with that. The second kind of part 1B is process automation. So we're not just answering FAQs, right? This is really now complex capability for the AI to do things like schedule and reschedule appointments, update, upsell orders, potentially gather all kinds of information to increase conversion. So really a multi-phased conversation that the AI is capable of having. The third big one, and this is probably the biggest growth outside of ChatGPT this year, has been Agent Assist AI. So many of you have probably heard of this or maybe seen some stuff at a trade show, but by far our biggest growing bucket of AI. How do we empower the agents to have the necessary tools to serve the customer as the conversation is unfolding? Whether that be dynamic scripting, pulling information from a knowledge base that's contextual, but again, just equipping them to have a robust conversation. And then it moves into things like AI routing and AI analytics. And how do we have that some of that great machine learning to come in and tell us what's working, what's not working, and that's both for our agent teams as well as the AI itself. So really the machines teaching the machines, which is I think what we've all been waiting for.
So this is, when you talk about your pillars, this is fundamentally like a framework that you've created with inside of RingCentral to categorize various different user stories and create maybe a path to the product that's going to solve that the best.
Yeah, I think because AI has become such a ubiquitous term, a big part of our job here at RingCentral is just helping to educate our customers and prospective customers. And I think that's so important in everything that we do. Don't be afraid. Like, go get it. It's there to help you if you make it so.
You told that story about your friend. I'll tell a story. One time I was out on a business visit to a client, and as I got ready in the hotel, I was putting on my shoes, I was sitting on the bed, and I'm watching the television and a morning business show, and they're speaking to somebody who was driving a lot of innovation in the healthcare environment, and they were providing a lot of telehealth, and they were interviewing this leader of this company, and he was just a very direct individual, and they said, well, what about your competition? And he said, my competition is dead and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
It was like being punched in the face with a reality of part of our ability to be sustainable, our ability to survive is our ability to adapt. And so sometimes you have to be proactive. You don't need to be bleeding edge. You certainly can be leading edge. And I think that right now there is maybe a little bit of an opportunity to win by being an early adopter around these tech.
100%. Disruption always creates opportunity.
So this dynamic of how we're going to maybe downsize the organization, redirect people into other parts of the organization that may have need, all of that is fights against a command and control structure, which is pretty traditional. How do you negotiate that conversation, John? Because you seem like you've been up against this for quite some time.
I'm so glad you asked that question. So I think there's a mythology that IVAs replace people. And the answer is they don't, right? What IVAs do is they replace mundane jobs that are low value, high volume. And it turns out that those are the kinds of jobs that actually impact that investment that most contact centers have made in their people. Because nobody wants to answer the same question day in and day out. It's what I describe with my customers as a soul-sucking job. What we've actually seen is that when you implement IVAs and you do it appropriately, and we'll have to touch upon that in just a second, but when you deploy them appropriately, what you see is that customer interaction time with a live agent goes up. So it doesn't actually reduce the time, but they go up in terms of that interaction because they're now having more meaningful conversations. And when live agents are typically surveyed, what they want to do, and everybody wants to do, is a job where they make a difference. So being able to produce a relationship, high value, long-term, engagement with an end customer is what live agents are looking for. So the hope is if you do it right, you're going to actually improve the people that these contact center managers are managing and make their jobs more fulfilling by removing all those mundane, soul-sucking tasks that an IVA is better handle.
Yeah, John, that's a super high EQ response, because there is kind of an assumption that, the only job that we're doing right now is the entire job that needs to be doing. That's a weird statement, but if you were to take away those mundane tasks, could you actually get to the job that you haven't been able to get to, which might be
Right.
better account-based management, better outbound calls to just provide offers and to drive business inside the organization. There's so much that isn't being done because the capacity to do it is not there. And when you move the mundane tasks, which are sucking at that capacity, right, and you move that over into another area, you can actually maybe move the ball forward better for the organization. It's a very nuanced topic, and it requires some kind of big brain thinking. You really have to kind of get out of your own space and think about, like, what could we be doing different in the business. I think that's the disruptive nature of AI.
Yeah, and we're going to ask our customers to rethink how they do business, because most of our customers are used to a paradigm that limited them at the beginning with just IVRs.
So let's maybe segue a little bit into another topic, kind of back to AI, and trying to understand a little bit about how AI and RingCX align. Artificial intelligence and self-service solutions have gained, obviously, immense traction. The majority of the mind share and topic discussions are about AI, and that is no different with inside of the contact center industry. Like I said before, these topics are the top of the marquee, and businesses recognize the potential of AI and self-service to transform their customer service and empower customers to find answers quickly. But with all of its promise, we could probably agree, vastly misunderstood in terms of its application. And most providers tout their AI capabilities to boot. And you are no different. Can you provide some insights maybe into what AI comes out of the box with RingCX and what possible options one could have in extending the AI capabilities?
So yeah, AI is an extremely broad term because there's a lot of technologies that are kind of rolled up under that label. And there's like three general categories of AI. There's generative AI, which is what ChatGPT is kind of democratized and made everybody aware of, even the consumer who never looked at the technology before. Then there's conversational AI, which is where you have a chat bot or a voice bot that allows a customer to basically communicate back and forth with the machine, and it'll use natural language understanding and natural language processing to translate what I'm saying into something that the bot can respond to. And those are very useful for things like all heavily repetitive type of interactions that an agent typically deals with.
Yeah, certainly. So I think RingCentral probably has an interesting take on this. And it really began with redefining the customer journey. I think historically, contact centers have thought about the customer journey. The moment a customer picks up the phone and calls us, that's when the clock would start. However, over the last, call it 24 months, we've really moved that timeline back. And we want to start the clock the second the customer has a question pop into their head, right? It could be, where is my order? It could be, what time is the store open to? Who won the ball game last night? Whatever that case is, right? We want to start solving with that information right then and there. And that extends all the way to what's happening on the website, what's happening in the Google search. And what we've learned is the better we control those upstream activities, the bigger the impact to the contact center in doing things like reducing call volume, even just having happier customers who call in because they're not frustrated. Those qualitative benefits are, just incredibly both hard to account for, but also the benefit to fixing that exponential. And so we've developed a multi-stage solution at RingCentral that really allows the customer, as they go through that journey, to keep feeding them additional information to get them to their ultimate goal. And it's been very successful so far. All of these channels were sort of designed with AI in mind and being able to deploy a bot. So I think that's a nice segue into what we were just talking about, is you don't have to be afraid of turning these channels on and then overwhelming your contact center with volume. There's a very smart way to do it while deploying AI to be able to have this be a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, it's really interesting as we've moved into a digital economy. So much of how people transact and how people communicate is done in a mobile sense. So, if you're going to go to a hotel, you're not waiting to get to the hotel and check in and have a conversation about something that you might be wanting to do there. You may actually be doing that in the back of the Uber on the way to the hotel. This is kind of the frictionless environment that we're moving into. And if your technology does not meet people on those various different mediums, you're going to lose out, and people are going to select other companies, other brands. And we know that ultimately today, right now, it takes one bad experience for a person to completely drop maybe a lifetime of doing business with that company, just because they don't feel that company is in touch anymore, or they don't value their business anymore, or they created potentially a problem in their schedule or in their flow of the day that they can't have that anymore. So they move to another provider that will meet them where they need to be. And it's just that tolerance is so little now that I don't understand sometimes why there is a reticence to want to bridge beyond the email, bridge beyond the simple chat, bridge beyond the voice, and to get into all these other channels. I mean, right away, you will probably maybe open up a new audience and maybe serve an audience that's underserved, and you had no idea that they were starting to fall away.
So it's a very good philosophical question that you raised, Frank.
They're just starting out. They need IVAs that can do ASR and text to speech really well and handle certain modalities. Well, that might be what we call a standard IVA. And that's 80% of the call volume, at least today, for example, with this example customer. But this customer wants to incorporate more natural language, right? So we say 20% of the calls going forward might be natural language. So rather than have 100 IVAs that do natural language, and now you've got some capabilities that are essentially not a good fit for 80% of the calls, we can mix and match, which means as the customer reaches that tipping point where they're doing more and more with natural language, we essentially just swap out that resource from a virtual IVA perspective. And that's that investment protection I was talking about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to go back to, again, the model that you have, because I do think it's brilliant. Because most people, when they're thinking of the contact center, it's really about how many took us in seats do we have? And so I have 300 people. And maybe as you look at some contraction, maybe you don't have contraction like you mentioned earlier, but maybe you do have some contraction. Well, how does that get refilled? By having the fact that you purchase 25 or 30 seats of an IVA, psychologically, I believe, shows where that fill is. Like, it's very easy to consume because it's part of the context and the construct of how a contact center works today. So it's easy for people to adopt. And when it goes down to the transactional level, I think it makes it harder. So I just think that is actually a really, really smart way to approach the market. And I think it's a key differentiator. And I think it also maybe makes it easier to buy.
Yeah, philosophically, we're trying to implant the idea in our customers that this is a resource very similar to human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to buy them, minutes at a time at a rate per minute, that really negates that approach. The approach is, here's a resource. They're available to you 24 hours a day, right? 7 days a week. They never get sick. They never take vacation.
Mm-hmm.
You can very quickly scale when you need to. You don't want to get painted into a corner or find out that you have very little runway as these technologies change. Five9 with our platform approach really allows you to be able to take advantage of the best out there, and we vet them, which also makes sure that at the end of the day, you're not the guinea pig for some AI provider. We'll vet them for you vis-a-vis the studio platform, which is where IVAs live within Five9.
Interesting. And it seems to me that the IVA itself, as a component of the Five9 offering, is something that works together with the contact center, the core contact center. But could you use this IVA with another contact center?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's kind of was our value proposition during COVID. So I myself implemented a solution for a company. They were using an Avaya CS1K. They were a large mortgage, clearinghouse. So essentially, they had a set of customers very much like a BPO. And when COVID hit, they had a choice, right? Send 500 employees home with no real ability to support them, or incorporate IVAs with some other born in the cloud UC solutions to actually help facilitate that transfer from in office to work at home. And so we did that, and as a result, they're able to continue operating. But that connection there was not to a born in the cloud solution. It was to a very old and tried and true CS1K, which is a big iron Avaya platform.
Interesting. And shockingly, there are many platforms still sitting out there that resemble that description.
Did they have a positive overall sentiment during the conversation? Did they have good energy? Did they interrupt the caller?
When it comes to the AI pieces about cognigy and dialogue flow, I would imagine that, part of your professional services teams can work with the client.
Cognigy and dialogue flow are independent solutions that a customer would subscribe to, and those are usage based, right? You pay based on how often customers actually leverage that. In our platform, you set up the link, and then you basically say on this digital channel, I'm going to check a box that says I'm going to handle this with a bot as the first point of response to the inbound message.
Okay.
Now we will not necessarily build out those intents and the responses and so on. That's where we could leverage partners like yourselves and other consultants to help the customer with that if they don't have the expertise on staff.
So if we're looking at the call flow, and if the call flow calls for sending a customer down a different path, and that is a digital path. So we're going to try and work with deflection. We now put them into this bot. If the bot experience requires movement back to an agent, we can reroute them back into RingCX to be escalated to that live agent.
Yeah, and even if you don't use a bot to handle some of these low value, high volume type of interactions, which you sometimes run into, we do use AI categorization and routing.
If the bot experience requires movement back to an agent, we can reroute them back into RingCX to be escalated to that live agent.
Yeah, and even if you don't use a bot to handle some of these low value, high volume type of interactions, which you sometimes run into, we do use AI categorization and routing. So we look at the content of the message and then basically say, okay, well, based on what's written in the message, the digital message, we can now decide how to route it to the right queue. So for example, I can have a single email channel on the platform, one email address, and then based on what the customer writes, I will route it to, let's say, billing or customer service or sales based on the question content. So we use AI for that routing, which then again, is one of the biggest frustrations when it comes to a customer reaching out to a business is how do I get to the right person who has the right expertise to handle my question? And these days with agents being asked to do more with less, many agents are actually being tasked to be able to handle more than just one specific type of call. And so how do you empower an agent? One of the things that RingCX brings to the table is we have an embedded knowledge base feature so that I can now have articles written that'll help an agent and that they're context sensitive. So we can essentially say, based on what channel, what queue the call came in on or the interaction came in on, it'll pop records or in the knowledge base that are relevant to that. Makes it very easy for the agent.
One of the things that we see in conversations around AI in particular is obviously, part of the talk track that goes with it is the displacement of people on the contact center. And that can be reapportionment or reassignment within inside the business, but regardless, it has that connotation. And perfectly honest, many of the contact center leaders that we work with are not too excited about that particular element of it. The group of people that they work with has become a family, and the thought of downsizing that family, as much as it may be for the betterment sometimes of the overall organization from a cost perspective and a sustainability perspective, is a challenge. And obviously AI doesn't have to mean that. How do you approach that, as you're talking about the impact of the customer experience? That's one thing, but then what are some of the business impacts, and how are people receptive to some of those various different points or optional points that they have in terms of course correction?
Yeah. So first, I want to be mindful that I'm not underplaying that this is disruptive technology. I think if you look back in history, the printing press, the cotton gin, right? Like all of those things have created seismic shifts in the labor force. And
Yes.
AI, I think, will eventually do that. I think in the short term, I think everybody doesn't have to be overly concerned that this is just going to wipe out the team immediately. But I don't want to be naive and say that changes aren't coming.